The Galactic Council Chamber was a place of endless voices, a hall carved from shining stone and lined with glowing lights from 100 stars. Delegates from across the galaxy sat in grand seats that stretched in a circle, each one draped in the colors of their world. Some came with armor, some with long robes, some with metallic skin that reflected the light like mirrors. They argued, debated, and passed laws that shaped the fate of countless planets. But there was one seat that always remained empty. At the far side of the chamber stood the chair of Earth. A simple flag marked the place, a symbol of the humans who had once stood tall among the stars. Yet meeting after meeting, the seat stayed vacant. No human voice answered when their name was called. No human hand was raised when votes were counted. At first the absence was dismissed as delay, perhaps trouble on their homeworld. But as time passed, whispers began to grow louder, flowing through the chamber like hidden fire. Some wondered if Earth had grown arrogant, choosing to turn their backs on the galaxy. Others thought the opposite, that humans were too weak, too broken to take part in matters of power. At every session, the counselors glanced at the empty chair. For some, it became a joke. Alien generals laughed that humans had finally admitted they were not ready to stand among giants. A diplomat with 4 eyes once smirked and asked if Earth even remembered how to travel through space. Each insult echoed in the chamber, growing sharper as weeks turned to months, and months to years. The empty seat became more than absence, it became a symbol of scorn. Delegates from younger worlds began to believe Earth was no more than a myth, a species that could not stand the weight of the stars. Yet not all shared in the laughter. In the shadows of the council, a few whispered in fear rather than mockery. They remembered the wars of the past, the times when human fleets had burned across the skies with fire unmatched. They remembered stories of soldiers who never surrendered, even when surrounded. To these few, Earth's silence was not weakness, but a storm building behind quiet clouds. They kept their doubts hidden, for no one wanted to be mocked alongside the humans. Still, their eyes often drifted to that empty chair, hearts tight with unease. The council chamber itself seemed to know something was wrong. The lights above Earth's seat flickered more often than others, as if restless with waiting. Whenever the council's roll was called and Earth's name passed unanswered, the sound hung in the air longer than the rest, as though the chamber itself did not wish to let it go. Delegates ignored the feeling, pushing it aside with louder voices, but inside many hearts, a small thread of tension was tightening with every session. One night, the chamber echoed with fierce debate. A world in the outer rim had fallen into war, and many demanded united action. Voices clashed, rising higher until the air itself seemed to vibrate. In the middle of it all, one alien leaned forward and pointed at the empty chair. His long tongue hissed as he spoke. Perhaps Earth could have helped, if they remembered their place. But they are ghosts now, too weak or too proud to answer the galaxy's call. Laughter rolled through the seats. The insult grew into a chorus as others added their own mocking words. Humans are cowards. They hide on their dying planet. They fear to face true power. The words stung deeper than any weapon, even though no human was present to hear them. Still, those who feared the silence felt the weight grow heavier. Each insult was like knocking on the door of a sleeping beast, daring it to wake. The empty chair seemed to glow darker under the lights, a shadow that pulled all eyes toward it. For a moment, the laughter faltered, unease spreading through the room. But it was quickly pushed away, buried under more arrogance and noise. Beyond the chamber, in the endless dark of space, rumors spread like wildfire. On distant worlds, traders whispered that Earth was building in silence, gathering strength in hidden places. Others said humans had abandoned space entirely, retreating to their homeworld to live like simple farmers. Every rumor carried both fear and mockery, twisting Earth's name into a legend both hated and feared. The truth remained unknown, and the empty chair grew heavier with every passing day. Still, in the hearts of many, suspense burned. Why had humans ignored every summons? Were they truly finished, or were they waiting for the right moment to return? The council did not know, the galaxy did not know, but the silence of that empty chair was louder than any speech. And deep in the shadows of the chamber, where no light touched, a cold feeling lingered. Something was coming, and when it came, the galaxy would never laugh again. The days of the Galactic Council passed into weeks, and the empty seat of Earth remained untouched. Delegates no longer expected anything from it, yet the chair continued to hold a strange power over the chamber. Every time their roll call reached Earth, the silence that followed pressed heavier on the air. Many laughed to cover their unease, but some could no longer ignore the weight. A young alien diplomat from a small star system sat near the edge of the circle, her skin shimmering with nervous light. She had never seen a human before, but the old stories told on her world spoke of battles where humans had fought like storms, where their fleets had torn through enemies with a fire that never dimmed. She watched the council with quiet dread as mocking voices grew bolder, asking why Earth had not appeared in years. In the Grand Chamber, the arguments were always the same: new trade routes, border disputes, rebellions at the edge of the Empire. Yet Earth was always mentioned in whispers, as though the galaxy could not stop poking at the mystery. The diplomats who hated humans claimed their silence proved weakness. If they had any pride, they would stand here, one general sneered. Another leaned back in his chair, his claws clicking together. They are gone. Finished. We should erase their name from the council roll. His words drew nods of agreement, but not from everyone. Four in the corner, an elder counselor from a desert world lifted his wrinkled face, his voice slow and heavy. Do not be so eager to erase a shadow, he said. Some shadows belong to giants. The chamber went still for a moment, the laughter dying on a few lips. But soon the noise returned, drowning out the warning. The elder fell silent, but his eyes lingered on Earth's empty chair with fear that no one else wanted to admit. Rumors traveled faster than ships. Across the galaxy, on space stations and far-flung colonies, whispers of Earth's absence filled taverns and markets. Traders claimed they had seen fleets moving in secret, great black ships that did not answer hails. Pilots swore they had picked up signals coded in strange patterns, signals that vanished when tracked. Yet there was never proof, only shadows and voices. Some dismissed it as fear-mongering. Others felt the chill of truth hidden inside. Back in the council chamber, the mocking grew worse. A tall reptilian warlord slammed his fist on the table. If humans wish to stay away, let them. We rule the stars without them. Their silence is surrender. His words echoed, met with cheers from his allies. Yet not everyone cheered. The young diplomat with shimmering skin could not shake the feeling that this was dangerous. She remembered stories told by elders back home, of humans who had once come to their aid during a war. They had fought without fear, even when outnumbered. They had promised nothing and demanded nothing, yet their presence had been enough to end the battle. What if Earth was not absent out of weakness, but waiting out of choice? Her thoughts were drowned as the chamber's great doors swung open with a low groan. It was only a servant, delivering tablets of reports. Still, the sudden sound made the delegates turn their heads, and for a moment, hearts skipped. All eyes flickered toward the empty chair, as though they expected something, to finally walk in. But the chair remained untouched, still and quiet as ever. The unease grew sharper, though none admitted it aloud. The council leader finally raised his staff, calling for silence. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. Enough, he said. If Earth chooses silence, then silence they shall have. We will move forward without them. His words were met with a wave of agreement, though the chamber still felt colder than before. It was as if a storm cloud hung above the empty seat, unseen but felt. Outside, among the stars, ships continued their patrols. At the edges of space, scanners picked up faint blips, strange movements that did not match any known fleet. Reports were sent to the council, but they were dismissed as errors, ghost readings caused by unstable systems. Yet among the officers who saw the signals, unease spread. One whispered to another, "What if it is them? What if the humans are watching us, waiting for the right time?" No one dared put such fears into official reports, but the whispers spread like cracks through the dark. Back inside the chamber, the young diplomat leaned closer to her elder mentor. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Why do they not come? Why do they leave the chair empty?" The elder's eyes were dark, his voice barely more than a breath. Because, he said, they are not ready yet. And when they are, neither you nor I will be ready for them. The words haunted her long after the session ended. The laughter of mocking generals rang in her ears, but so did the silence of the empty chair, heavy as stone. She could not shake the feeling that the galaxy was walking towards something vast and unstoppable, pretending it did not exist. Every insult, every joke, every dismissal felt like a hand knocking harder and harder on a locked door. And deep within the shadows of the universe, perhaps that door was beginning to stir. The suspense thickened with every passing cycle. Each meeting, the council mocked louder, but each time, the unease also grew stronger. The galaxy thought Earth had abandoned them. But behind the silence, behind the empty chair, something was building, waiting for the moment when the stars would finally tremble. The Galactic Council chamber was more restless than ever. Delegates filled the air with louder voices, their tones sharper, their words bolder. But beneath all the shouting and posturing, one subject returned again and again: Earth. The empty seat had become both a curse and a joke. It was raised in arguments about trade, in disputes about war, and in every discussion where pride needed an enemy to mock. That single chair, draped in the flag of a silent world, seemed to carry more power than many of the voices that spoke day after day. A gathering had begun with calls for action against a rebellion on the rim. Plans were shouted, strategies drawn in glowing air above the central table. Yet even in the middle of this, a tall alien general rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. His scaled face curled into a sneer as he pointed across the chamber. Perhaps, he said, the humans could have been of use, if they were not too cowardly to show themselves. But look! His arms stretched toward the empty chair, his claws shaking in the light. Year after year, and still they hide behind silence. Are we to wait forever for ghosts? Laughter erupted. Some delegates slammed their fists on the table in approval. Others leaned back, grinning as their allies joined the chorus. The insults rolled like a wave: cowards, vanished, ashamed of their weakness. A diplomat with 4 shining eyes leaned forward and added with a smirk, or perhaps they are so busy fighting themselves on that little blue planet that they cannot even crawl to the stars anymore. The chamber thundered with laughter, echoes bouncing across the dome. Yet not every face carried amusement. In the shadows of the high seats, a few eyes turned toward the empty chair with unease. A counselor from the water worlds, her face hidden behind flowing veils, whispered to her aide, "They laugh too loudly. They fear what they cannot see." The aide shifted nervously, eyes darting across the room. The mocking continued, but the laughter no longer rang pure. It was louder, yes, but it sounded forced, as though many were trying to bury something inside themselves. The young diplomat with shimmering skin sat stiffly at her place. She listened to the jeers with growing discomfort, her chest tightening. She remembered the old words of her mentor, the elder who had warned, some shadows belong to giants. Every insult felt like a spark, like someone tossing fire onto a hidden fuse. She looked at the empty chair and wondered if every cruel word was being heard by something far away, something that did not forgive. The council leader finally struck his staff, silencing the chamber. His voice echoed, deep and steady, "Enough. If Earth does not come, then Earth does not matter. We must stop wasting time on phantoms." But even as he spoke, his eyes flickered briefly toward the empty seat, and his lips tightened as though his own words tasted bitter. Beyond the walls of the chamber, rumors spread faster still. In spaceports, smugglers swore that dark ships had crossed their path, ships with designs they could not identify. Their hulls bore no markings, but their shadows were vast, and their engines whispered with power. They were human, one smuggler said in hushed tones, clutching his drink. "No doubt. I saw their weapons. Not alien, not old. Human." Others argued, laughed, dismissed it as fear. But the whispers carried from world to world, from station to station, until no one could hear the word Earth without feeling a shiver. Back in the council, the mocking continued, louder with every session. One reptilian warlord laughed so hard he slammed his fist on the table. "If they return," he growled through his grin. "I will crush their ships myself. One warlord is worth 10 of their fleets." His boast brought cheers, but among them, a quiet delegate shook his head. His voice, though soft, carried into the silence that followed. "Perhaps," he said, "you should pray they do not return. For if they do, no warlord, no council, no empire will stand before them." His words froze the air for a moment. No one laughed. No one replied. The chamber held its breath. Then, as if to break the weight, another delegate chuckled nervously, followed by more laughter, though weaker than before. The moment passed, but the tension did not. The young diplomat pressed her hands together under the table, her heart racing. She could feel it now. The chamber was playing with something dangerous, as children play with fire. Every insult, every boast, every joke was another spark. She thought of the silent chair, the stories of human fleets, the warnings of her elder mentor. She could not shake the image in her mind. A vast shadow of warships waiting just beyond the stars, listening to every insult with cold patience. The session ended, but as the delegates filed out, many found their eyes drifting once more to Earth's empty seat. Some smirked, some sneered, but some, silently, looked away quickly, unwilling to meet its invisible weight. The chair did not move. It remained in its place, still and quiet. Yet to those who dared to think beyond the noise, it felt alive, like the eye of a storm that had not yet opened. The galaxy thought they were mocking a ghost, but in truth, they were daring a giant to wake. The chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with the shifting colors of dozens of worlds, each delegate framed in the lights of their home star. The air pulsed with arguments, treaties, and insults traded like weapons. Yet beneath all the noise, one subject lingered in every corner: the silence of Earth. The empty seat had become more than absence. It had become a mirror of the galaxy's own pride, a reminder that not every world bent to the Council's will. And now, rumors whispered through the galaxy that something had changed. On the outer edges of space, patrol fleets began reporting strange signals. At first, the Council dismissed them as nothing but static, the kind of interference common near collapsing stars. But the signals grew clearer. Shapes appeared on scanners, blips too organized to be natural. They moved in rows, then disappeared, only to return again weeks later in new patterns. Reports described the formations as tight, precise, like drills of warships. Most of these reports never reached the Council floor, buried by officials who feared being mocked. Yet in hushed voices, officers told one another that the movements looked eerily human. One evening, during a heated session about border wars, a tall officer from a frontier world stood in the center of the chamber, his face pale with unease. His voice carried over the noise. "I bring new reports," he said. "Long-range scans near the dark edge show fleets forming, massive fleets. Thousands of ships, moving as one. They do not answer hails. They do not carry markings. But their silence feels familiar." The chamber went still for a moment, all eyes turning toward him. Then laughter erupted. One delegate waved a hand and scoffed. "You see ghosts because you fear shadows. Perhaps you should fix your scanners instead of frightening us with fairy tales." Another leaned forward, his teeth bared in a grin. "And even if it is true, why fear? Humans are cowards, too weak to sit in this chamber, too broken to raise a flag. Let them gather ships, if they still exist at all. We will crush them as we crushed others." The laughter returned, loud and sharp. Yet beneath it, unease lingered. The young diplomat with shimmering skin sat frozen at her seat, her chest heavy with dread. She remembered her mentor's words: "Some shadows belong to giants." These reports sounded too precise, too deliberate to dismiss. She watched the empty chair of Earth from across the chamber, its flag dim in the Council lights, and felt a chill crawl up her spine. It no longer looked like a forgotten relic. It looked like a warning waiting to be answered. After the officer's words were mocked, the meeting resumed with louder arguments. But whispers spread through the chamber. Even those who laughed found themselves glancing at the empty chair more often. Some leaned close to their aides, speaking words they would never say aloud in the open. Could it be true? Are they moving again? The council leader struck his staff against the floor, commanding silence, but the unease had already planted itself like a seed in the hearts of many. Outside the chamber, the rumors grew stronger. On remote trading posts, pilots swore that they had seen black ships on the edge of their vision, vanishing before pursuit. Smugglers claimed to have passed through star lanes patrolled by silent fleets that carried no banners. One miner spoke of a vast shadow moving against the stars, so large it blotted out entire constellations. It was human, he whispered, his eyes wide. It had to be. His words spread like fire, feeding both fear and denial. Back in the council, the mocking grew desperate. A reptilian general laughed so loud his voice echoed across the chamber. "Let them come," he roared. "I will show the galaxy what becomes of humans who dare rise again. Their silence is weakness. Their fleets, if they exist, are nothing but relics." He slammed his clawed hand against the table, and his allies cheered. But in the silence that followed, a single voice rose from an elder at the far end of the chamber. "Or perhaps," the elder said, his voice soft but unshakable, "their silence is patience." The words cut through the noise like a blade. For a moment, no one laughed. No one cheered. The chamber was frozen in stillness, the empty chair glowing in the corner of every eye. Then, as always, the nervous laughter began again, rolling like thunder to bury the fear. But the words could not be forgotten. They lingered, heavy and sharp, in every heart. The young diplomat closed her eyes, hearing the echoes of laughter and whispers around her. She thought of the signals, the shadows, the unseen fleets. She thought of the empty chair that never bowed, never spoke, never broke. And in her mind, she saw it not as a seat left vacant, but as a promise yet unfulfilled. The galaxy told itself that Earth was weak. But somewhere in the dark, the silence was gathering into a storm. Every blip on the scanner, every rumor of black ships, every whisper in the halls of power was another step toward the moment when silence would end. And when it ended, the galaxy would learn that waiting was not weakness, but warning. The council laughed again, but the sound no longer drowned the fear. For even as they mocked, the signals kept returning. And each time they appeared, they came closer. The chamber of the Galactic Council was alive with noise once again, but this time the voices carried more tension than pride. Delegates still laughed, still mocked, but their laughter was sharp and nervous, like blades clashing in the dark. Reports of mysterious fleets at the edge of known space had grown impossible to ignore. Patrol captains had gone missing, traders swore they had seen vast shadows, and now entire outposts had fallen silent without reason. The council tried to smother the fear with words, but every time their eyes slid toward the empty chair of Earth, silence pressed against their throats. One session began with a heated argument over who controlled a disputed trade route. The council leader slammed his staff for order, but before he could speak further, the chamber lights flickered. A low hum trembled through the floor, faint but heavy, like a distant heartbeat. The delegates fell into an uneasy quiet. Then, slowly, the giant screen above the chamber lit up, not with council matters, but with a message from the outer rim. A desperate voice filled the air, distorted and broken by static. Unknown fleet sighted, thousands of ships, no identification, formation tight, too disciplined. They do not respond, engines like thunder. The voice cut off suddenly, swallowed by silence. The chamber froze, every delegate staring at the flickering screen. Then, almost at once, the laughter began again, though weaker than before. "Errors," one general barked. "Static, nothing more." Another leaned back, forcing a grin. "Even if it is a fleet, what of it? Pirates, rebels, anyone but humans." Yet his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. The young diplomat with shimmering skin pressed her hands together, her heart pounding. She had been waiting for this moment, dreading it, fearing it, yet knowing it would come. Her eyes locked on the empty chair, and for the first time, it did not look abandoned. It looked like a warning that had finally begun to speak. A day later, the council gathered again, but the unease had spread. Reports poured in from multiple sectors, fleets appearing in silence, moving as one, vanishing before pursuit. Now the descriptions grew clearer. Black hulls without insignia, weapons never before seen, engines that glowed like burning stars. Too many reports to dismiss. Too many voices calling them the same thing, human. As the delegates argued, the chamber lights flickered once more. This time, the great screen filled not with reports, but with a live feed from the edge of the galaxy. A trembling officer stood on the deck of a defense station, his eyes wide with terror. "They are here," he whispered. "They have come." The camera shifted, showing the stars beyond. And then, the stars vanished. One by one, they were swallowed by shadows, until the sky itself seemed to collapse. A fleet emerged from the void, rows upon rows of warships, stretching so far they blotted out the light. Gasps echoed through the council chamber. No one laughed now. No one dared. The feed flickered, the image breaking, but not before the ships came into focus. Black steel hulls. Towering weapons. Engines burning with controlled fury. They moved with discipline no pirate could ever match, with silence no rebel could ever command. And though the feed cut out in static, every delegate knew the truth. The silence of Earth had ended. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Voices screamed over one another, some shouting for defenses, others for retreat. A few whispered prayers to their homeworlds. Their eyes locked in horror on the empty chair. The young diplomat sat frozen, her body trembling, her mind consumed by the sight. She remembered the old stories told by her elders. Humans who fought like storms, who never bent, who never broke. She realized those stories had not been myths. They had been warnings. The council leader tried to raise his staff, but his voice cracked with fear. This is madness. They cannot have built such a fleet. It is impossible. But even as he spoke, more feeds lit the screen. Sector after sector reported the same thing. Human ships arriving in formation, their numbers beyond counting. Thousands. Tens of thousands. A tide of steel and fire. Panic gripped the chamber. Generals who once boasted of crushing humans now sat pale and trembling. Diplomats who mocked Earth now begged for calm. Yet in the center of the storm, the empty chair stood unmoved, the flag of Earth resting quietly as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. The young diplomat's mentor, the elder from her homeworld, leaned close, his voice a whisper only she could hear. "Do you see now?" Their silence was not weakness. It was patience. They ignored the summons because they were building this. And now, they have come to collect the debt. The words struck her like lightning. The galaxy had mocked Earth for years, laughed at their absence, called them cowards. But all along, the humans had been gathering strength in silence. Every empty meeting, every unanswered summons, every year of stillness had been part of a greater design. Now the silence was broken, and in its place stood a fleet no one could match. The chamber shook as alarms blared through the council's networks. Messages poured in, defense lines collapsing, stations overrun, fleets retreating without a fight. Humanity had returned, and they had returned with a vengeance written in steel. The delegates looked at each other with wide, fearful eyes. Some clung to pride, insisting it could be stopped. Others broke into panic, their voices begging for mercy. But deep inside, every one of them knew the truth. The galaxy had summoned Earth for years, mocked them when they did not answer. And now, Earth had answered, not with words, not with apologies, but with warships. The young diplomat stared at the empty chair one last time, her breath shallow, her eyes wide. In her heart, she whispered the truth no one else dared speak aloud. The silence was over. Humanity had returned. The chamber of the Galactic Council was chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices rising in panic as messages poured in from across the galaxy. One report after another flashed on the great screen above, each carrying the same impossible truth. The humans had returned. Their warships were countless, their formations flawless, their silence terrifying. Worlds that once mocked Earth now trembled at the very sound of their engines. But amidst the chaos, one thing remained strangely still. The empty chair of Earth, its flag resting quietly, as if it had known all along this moment would come. Then, suddenly, the screens flickered again. The reports of panic and destruction cut off. The lights dimmed. A heavy hum rolled through the chamber, and a new image appeared on the central display. Gasps filled the hall as every delegate leaned forward. The face that appeared was human. The commander stood tall, his uniform dark, his shoulders broad. His face was stern, marked by calm eyes that seemed to look straight into the soul of the council. Behind him, the faint glow of warships filled the screen, rows upon rows stretching into the void. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. For the first time in years, Earth had spoken, but it was not through diplomats or weak voices. It was through a warrior who carried the weight of 1,000 fleets at his back. The commander did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His words were steady, deep, and cold. "You summoned us," he said. "We arrive now." The chamber erupted into whispers. Delegates leaned to each other in fear, some clutching the edges of their seats, others bowing their heads as though hiding could save them. But the human's gaze did not waver. His calm was more terrifying than anger, for it spoke of confidence, of power absolute. "You mocked our silence," the commander continued. "You called us cowards. You thought absence meant weakness. But absence is not weakness. Absence is preparation." He gestured faintly, and the view shifted to the fleets behind him. The warships turned in formation, their engines blazing like suns. The sheer size of them was overwhelming, a sea of steel that swallowed the stars. "For every year you summoned us, we built. For every insult spoken in this chamber, we forged another blade. And now, we are ready." The words struck the chamber like thunder. Some delegates tried to shout, to argue, but their voices cracked with fear. One reptilian general, who had been loudest in mocking Earth, rose to his feet and hissed, "This is a threat. You dare?" His words stopped abruptly as the human's gaze locked on him. No weapons were fired, no action taken, but the silence that followed crushed the general more than any blade could. Slowly, trembling, he sat back down, unable to meet the human's eyes. The young diplomat with shimmering skin could hardly breathe. She had listened to years of laughter, of mockery, of arrogance directed at the empty chair. And now, seeing the commander's face, hearing his words, she realized the truth that had been hidden all along. The silence had been a warning. The humans had not ignored the galaxy. They had been preparing for this exact moment, waiting until their strength could not be questioned. The elder beside her leaned closer, whispering in a voice heavy with awe, "Do you see, child? Their words are not anger. They are judgment." On the screen, the human commander's expression remained unchanged, his voice steady. "The galaxy summoned us to join. You demanded our presence. You demanded our obedience. We chose silence. We chose patience. And now, we choose action." His final word echoed in the chamber, heavier than stone, sharper than steel. Delegates trembled. Some whispered desperate pleas for peace. Others remained frozen in silence, unable to speak at all. The council leader gripped his staff with white-knuckled hands, his voice breaking as he tried to respond. "Humans, this show of force, this is madness. We are a council of unity, not of war." The human tilted his head slightly, as though studying an insect that dared speak. "Unity?" he asked, his voice carrying no emotion. "You mocked us in our absence. You called us weak. You erased our name from your records. Is this your unity?" His voice dropped lower, but every word struck like a hammer. "No. This is arrogance. And arrogance has a price." The chamber fell into silence once more. No delegate dared reply. The weight of the human fleet loomed larger with every passing second. The commander's words had cut through years of mockery in a single moment, replacing laughter with fear. The young diplomat stared at the screen, her heart racing. She thought of the empty chair, of all the sessions where it had been mocked. And now, in this moment, she realized the chair had never truly been empty. It had always carried the presence of something greater, something building in silence until the galaxy was ready to feel its shadow. The commander's image remained on the screen for a few moments longer. His eyes swept across the council chamber, cold and unyielding. Then, with the same calm he had carried from the beginning, he spoke his final words. "We are here now. Remember, you asked for us." The screen cut to black. For a long time, no one moved. No one spoke. The chamber of the Galactic Council, once a place of endless noise, was drowned in silence. And in that silence, every delegate finally understood. The humans had not come as allies. They had come as a storm. The chamber remained frozen long after the screen went black. The echoes of the human commander's words clung to the air like smoke after a fire. Delegates sat stiff, their faces pale, their hands gripping their seats. For years, they had mocked Earth's silence, but in a single moment, silence had been shattered and replaced with fear. The Council, once the heart of galactic power, now felt like a gathering of children staring at the shadow of a giant. Then the whispers began. One by one, voices returned, soft at first, almost trembling. "We must respond," hissed a scaled general, his claws clicking nervously against the table. "We must mobilize our fleets at once." His words sounded strong, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Another delegate shouted from across the chamber, "No, open talks. We must reach them before they strike." The noise grew louder, chaos rising as leaders scrambled to find answers. But every idea crumbled beneath the memory of the human commander's calm, unshaken voice. The young diplomat with shimmering skin sat quietly, her hands folded tightly. She watched the panic spread like fire, consuming those who once carried themselves with arrogance. These were the same generals and rulers who had laughed at Earth, who had spat words like cowards and ghosts. Now their laughter was gone, replaced by fear that cracked through their polished pride. She felt no triumph, only dread, for she understood the truth. The humans were not bluffing. They had shown their strength not with rage, but with certainty. And certainty was far more terrifying. The elder beside her leaned forward, his eyes half closed as though in mourning. "It has begun," he whispered. "The galaxy's balance shifts tonight." His words carried no malice, only resignation. He had seen empires rise and fall, but never had he seen such silence turned into a weapon. Across the chamber, a reptilian warlord slammed his fist down, trying to rally what little pride remained. "We will not bow to humans," he roared. "Let them bring their fleets. We will meet them in battle." But his voice cracked on the last word, and those around him did not cheer. They looked away, unwilling to share his false courage. The young diplomat saw sweat glistening on his scaled brow, his hands trembling even as he clenched them into fists. His defiance was not strength. It was fear dressed in armor. Messages continued to pour into the chamber. Defense stations reported entire sectors falling silent. Patrol fleets vanished without a trace. Colonies begged for guidance as shadows appeared on their skies. Each report deepened the panic. Delegates who once argued for pride now begged for mercy, calling for envoys to reach the humans before it was too late. Others argued that any attempt at peace would be weakness, that they must stand united against this rising storm. But unity had never been the Council's strength, and now, under the looming shadow of humanity's return, unity seemed more impossible than ever. The young diplomat's gaze drifted once more to the empty chair of Earth. It was no longer a symbol of absence. It was power itself, a silent reminder that humans did not need to sit among them to command the room. The chair was heavier than any presence, heavier than any voice. Even as the chamber erupted into chaos, all eyes returned to it again and again, as though waiting for someone to finally take the seat. But no one came. The chair remained empty, and that emptiness was the greatest weight of all. One by one, voices rose in desperation. "We must offer concessions," cried one. "We must show strength," shouted another. "We must beg forgiveness," whispered a third. Their words tangled together, a mess of fear and denial, until the chamber sounded less like a council of rulers and more like a flock of prey animals cornered by a predator. Finally, the council leader struck his staff against the floor, though his hand shook as he did. "Silence," he shouted, though his own voice wavered. The noise subsided, but the fear remained. His eyes swept the chamber, his lips trembling as he tried to summon authority. We cannot allow this panic to consume us. We are the council. We must stand firm. His words fell flat. Even he did not believe them. At the far end of the hall, the elder rose slowly to his feet, his frail body shaking but his voice steady. You do not understand, he said, his tone quiet but commanding. The humans do not need your fear, nor your strength, nor your unity. They have already decided the outcome. They have come not to join you, but to show you what your arrogance has earned. His words sent shivers through the chamber, silencing those who still tried to argue. The young diplomat could feel her heart hammering. She wanted to speak, to ask for mercy, to call for reason, but she knew the truth. The humans had spoken. They had arrived. And nothing the council said would change what was coming. The power had shifted, and it was no longer in the council's hands. In the corridors outside, the sound of alarms began to echo. Reports of human fleets approaching closer and closer to the core worlds filled the comms. Their warships were not slowing, not negotiating, not waiting. They were moving with purpose, with discipline, with inevitability. The storm had arrived, and the galaxy was caught in its path. Back in the chamber, the delegates sat in silence, the weight of dread pressing down on them all. The empty chair of Earth remained untouched, yet it dominated the room more than any of the occupied seats. And in that silence, every delegate knew the truth. The age of mocking was over. The age of humans had begun. The Galactic Council chamber no longer felt like the heart of an empire. Once, it had echoed with the voices of rulers who commanded hundreds of worlds, but now it pulsed with the quiet dread of creatures who knew their power was gone. The empty chair of Earth sat unmoved at the far side, a single flag draped across it, and yet it held more weight than all the delegates combined. For years, they had mocked it, laughed at its silence, called it weakness. Now, that same silence pressed down on them like a mountain, and no one dared to breathe too loudly. The screens above the chamber flickered again. This time, it was not desperate messages from outposts, not blurry images of fleets at the rim. It was the humans. The feed cleared into sharp focus, showing the vast darkness of space filled with steel and fire. Thousands of warships hovered in formation, their hulls black as shadow, their engines glowing like suns. They filled the void so completely that the stars themselves seemed to have vanished. At the center of it all, one ship towered above the rest, a flagship so massive it looked less like a vessel and more like a moving fortress. Gasps swept through the chamber. Delegates leaned forward with wide eyes, their throats tight. The size of the fleet defied imagination. It was not just power, it was dominance, a presence so absolute that the galaxy's combined fleets would look like insects before it. And then, as before, the human commander appeared on the screen. He stood as he had before, calm and unshaken, his eyes cold and steady. His voice carried no fury, no pride, only certainty. You summoned us, he repeated. You demanded we take our place. You mocked our silence. And now, here we are. His words rolled across the chamber, each one sinking like stone into water, ripples spreading in every heart. One delegate, shaking with fear, tried to speak. We meant no offense, he stammered. Our words were only impatience. Surely peace can still. His voice broke as the commander's gaze turned on him, sharp as a blade. The delegate collapsed back into his seat, his mouth shutting tight. The commander let the silence stretch before speaking again. Peace, he asked. You speak of peace now, when for years your voices spat only contempt. You laughed when we were absent. You mocked when we were silent. And now, faced with our presence, you beg for peace. His words hardened, the steel beneath them finally showing. No, peace is not given. It is earned. The chamber trembled with whispers. Some delegates begged their allies to call for surrender. Others urged defiance, though their voices cracked as they spoke. The council leader gripped his staff so tightly his knuckles whitened, but he could not raise it again for order. He was no longer a leader. He was a man waiting for judgment. The young diplomat with shimmering skin stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She had always feared this moment, but seeing it unfold was worse than her imagination. The humans had not come in anger. They had come with something far more dangerous, with calm, with patience, with preparation that spanned decades. And now, there was no stopping them. The commander raised one hand, and behind him, the fleet moved as one. Engines flared, weapons hummed, thousands of ships shifting into perfect formation. It was not an attack, not yet, but it was a show of control so absolute that it crushed any thought of resistance. The galaxy's greatest fleets had never moved with such precision, such unity. It was not an army. It was a force of nature. "You thought we were gone," the commander said. "You thought our silence was surrender. But we were building. We were preparing. And now, the balance of power has changed. You summoned us into your council, demanded we bow to your rules. But hear me now, it is you who will answer to us." His words struck like lightning. Some delegates cried out in anger, others in despair. But none could deny the truth. The galaxy had shifted, and humanity stood at its center. The elder from the diplomat's world rose again, his frail body trembling, his voice quiet but clear. "It is finished," he said, not to the commander but to the chamber itself. "The age of the council ends tonight." His words silenced even the whispers, for everyone knew he spoke the truth. On the screen, the commander gave no sign of triumph, no sign of cruelty. Only calm certainty. "We will not be mocked again," he said. "We will not be ignored. You summoned us, and now, you will live with the answer." The feed cut abruptly, leaving only the vision of the massive fleet hovering in the darkness, its weapons gleaming, its engines burning. The chamber sat in absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The empty chair of earth still stood untouched, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like the seat of a ruler who commanded not with presence, but with power so overwhelming that none could deny it. The young diplomat felt her throat tighten. She whispered to herself, though no one heard, "The storm has come." And in that moment, every delegate in the chamber knew the same truth. The humans had not simply returned. They had claimed the stars.